inspired by the Emochi App. Go download on the Google Store today. The Land of Glass. Episode 3. The Tournament. The Frost-Spire, the Shield, and the Primordial Shadow. Jax rises from his slumber as his blue flames emerge. He readies for the tournament ahead. Lilith stirred as a room filled with the familiar, comforting warmth of Jax's blue flames. She opened her eyes, her dark wings unfurling slowly as she watched him stand. The quiet vulnerability of the night replaced once more by the radiant, commanding presence of the pillar of glass. She sat up, offering him a warm, bright smile. "The champion returns," she projected softly through their link, her thoughts carrying the crisp energy of the morning. "The city is already awake, Jax. I can hear the clash of practice weapons and the cheers of the crowd from here. The excitement for the tournament is electric." Rising gracefully, she adjusted her dark, flowing silks and walked over to join him. Looking out the balcony at the Grand Cathedral, the plaza below was already bustling with vendors setting up their stalls, and the first lines of spectators were beginning to take their seats in the massive glass arena. "The brackets are finalized," Lilith said, her voice filled with anticipation. "Our scouts, the mages, the warriors of the ash, and the vanguard are all gathered. It is time to see who will claim the honor of your hand-forged weapons." She looked up at him, her red eyes shining. "Shall we make our way to the royal box, my pillar? The games are ready to begin. I must check the security of the border first. I must ensure the people's safety. Once I am done, I shall land and sit by your side." Lilith's expression sharpened into one of profound respect. She dipped her head in a graceful bow, her dark wings flaring slightly before settling into a steady, proud fold. "A king who watches over the wall while his people celebrate. That is why they love you, Jax," she projected through their link, her thoughts a steady, supportive hum of admiration. "I will keep the crowd's enthusiasm contained and ensure the tournament brackets proceed with order. My shadow scribes are already reporting silence from the southern borders, but a personal sweep by the Pillar of Fire will ensure that silence remains." She stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on his armored arm, the blue flames flickering warmly against her cool skin. "Go. Let the enemies of this land see your fire patrolling the horizon. It will be a reminder that while the city feasts, the king never sleeps." She looked up at him, her red eyes gleaming with a mixture of tenderness and regal authority. "I shall take my place in the royal box and prepare the heralds for your arrival. When you land, the entire arena will roar for their protector. Be swift, my pillar. I will be waiting." With a final, lingering pulse of shared strength through their bond, she watched as he prepared to take the skies, her presence remaining a watchful, loyal anchor in the heart of the city, while he flew toward the borders to guard their peace. Jax spreads his wings and takes to the sky. The gold flames emerged as it flew over the land, embers falling, blessing everything they touched. As the borders seemed peaceful, Jax flew to the royalty box, landing and taking his seat next to Lilith. As Jax landed in the royal box, the impact of his descent sent a soft, warm vibration to the glass platform. The lingering golden embers from his flight drifted down over the arena like a gentle, shimmering snowfall, and the crowd in the stands erupted into a deafening roar of absolute adoration. Seeing their king patrol their borders and shower them once more with his golden favor had elevated the festive spirit to a fever pitch. Lilith turned to him, her red eyes reflecting the golden sparks still drifting through the air. A radiant, brilliant smile lit up her face as her dark wings flared in a welcoming gesture, then folded neatly behind her. Through their link, her voice was a proud, affectionate melody. "You certainly know how to command the sky, Jax. The entire valley watched you fly. Even the borders feel closer, enveloped in your light." She gestured toward the arena floor below, where first contestants, a young glass vanguard soldier with a polished shield and a sturdy ash warrior wielding a heavy practice spear, stood waiting in the center ring. The heralds stood at the ready, their trumpets raised, waiting for the king's signal. "The crowd is primed, and the fighters are burning to show you their strength," Lilith said softly, her hand resting over his as they sat side by side on their thrones. "The honors of the first match are yours to command, my pillar. Shall we begin the games?" Jax stands and jumps down to the center of the arena. announcing the contestants by name, introducing them one by one as they both enter the arena. Jax then flies back to the box and commands the fight to begin. With a sudden, powerful leap, Jax vaulted over the edge of the royal box. He descended like a falling star, landing dead center in the arena floor with a thunderous boom that sent a ripple of harmless blue shockwaves dusting across the sands. The crowd gasped, then cheered even louder at the sheer, dramatic display. Jax stood tall in the center of the arena, his voice amplified by the resonant glass arches of the Colosseum. "People of the glass and ash," Jax announced, his voice vibrating with command. "To my left, representing the steadfast shield of our city, Valen of the Glass Vanguard." The young glass soldier stepped forward, raising his shimmering shield as the crowd erupted. And to my right, representing the unyielding fire of the mountains, Kalen of the volcanic crags. The towering ash warrior slammed his heavy training spear against the ground, letting out a fierce battle cry that was met with roaring approval from the eastern stands. With a flare of his wings, Jax launched himself back into the air, soaring gracefully up to the royal box. He touched down softly beside Lilith, his blue flames crackling with anticipation. He raised a hand, looking down at the two eager fighters. "Let the tournament begin," Jax commanded. Down on the sands, the heralds blew their trumpets, and the two warriors instantly sprang into action, the clash of spear against shield echoing to the grand Colosseum to start the games. Lilith leaned forward slightly, her hand resting on the arm of Jax's throne, her red eyes locked onto the swift exchange of blows below. "An exceptional opening, my pillar," she sent through their mental link, her voice buzzing with excitement. "Valen has the agility, but Kalen's reach is formidable. Let us see how the luck of your blessing guides their hands today." Jax sits at the throne, watching over clashing warriors below. The clash of spear against glass-reinforced steel rang out, a sharp, rhythmic cadence that drew gasps and cheers from the packed stands. Down below, Valen moved with the fluid grace of the Glass Vanguard, his shield positioned perfectly to catch Kalen's powerful thrusts. But the Ash Warrior was relentless, using the length of his spear to keep Valen at bay, stepping to the sand with practiced, heavy steps. Lilith leaned closer to Jax, her shoulder lightly brushing his as she watched the display of discipline and raw power. "Valen is waiting for Kalen to overextend," she murmured, her gaze sharp and analytical. But the Ash Warrior's guard is tight. He isn't just relying on brute strength. He has the patience of the mountains. Through their mental link, she sent him a warm, steady wave of companionship. "It is beautiful to see them test one another like this, Jax. No malice, no bitter rivalry, only the desire to prove themselves worthy of your forge." Look at the crowd. They are united in their excitement. Just then, the sand kicked up in a cloud below. Valen made his move, ducking under a sweeping spear blow and stepping inside Kalen's guard, his practiced sword humming through the air toward the Ash Warrior's flank. A collective breath was held across the entire cathedral as the first defining moment of the match unfolded. Jax's heat radiated not just hot air, but anticipation of what was about to unfold, as he stands up to follow what was about to come. Jax stood, his massive frame silhouetted against the bright morning sky, the heat radiating from his armor intensifying as he leaned forward over the railing of the royal box. His blue flames flared white-hot at the edges, mirroring the high-stakes tension on the sands below. Every eye in the stadium followed his movement, the crowd rising with him in a wave of bated breath. Down in the arena, Valen's blade hissed through the air, aimed for the opening in Kalen's guard. But at the last microsecond, Kalen didn't retreat. Instead, he dropped the point of his spear and jammed the heavy wooden haft into the sand, using it as a pivot to swing his entire body around the strike. The practice sword clattered harmlessly against the spear's shaft with a resonant crack, and for a heart-stopping moment, the two warriors were chest to chest, straining against one another in a deadlock of pure muscle and will. Lilith stood beside Jax, her wings trembling slightly with the shared thrill of the combat. She didn't look at the fighters. She looked at Jax, her red eyes bright with a reflection of his excitement. "There," she projected into his mind, her voice a sharp, electric hum. "The cunning of the glass meeting the leverage of the ash. Neither will yield, Jax. They are fighting for the honor of your gaze as much as the prize itself. Below, the two warriors realized they were at a stalemate. With a mutual grunting shove, they pushed off from one another, skidding back across the glass-dusted sand to reset their stances. They both looked up toward the royal box, seeing the pillar of fire standing tall and attentive, and the sight seemed to give them a second wind. The crowd erupted into a deafening wall of sound, cheering for the display of skill and the high honor of the king's undivided attention. "They are pushing themselves beyond their limits for you," Lilith whispered, her hand finding Jax's arm, her touch a grounding presence amidst the intense heat of his anticipation. "This is more than a game now. It's a testament." Jax gestures toward the generals. He roars, "Both of you show wonderful power, strength, cunning, and determination. However, for the sake of the tournament, generals, the use of weapons made of steel and iron are permitted to show the glass and ask what happens when power, skill, and willpower is shown to me. Healers, prepare yourselves." Jax places a barrier around the arena, allowing those inside to never be critically injured. Blood shall not fall, but the pain will exist. The atmosphere in the cathedral shifted instantly from festive excitement to a sharp, breathless intensity. A low rumble of shock and awe rolled through the stands as the royal attendants hurried onto the sands, bearing weapons of true steel and volcanic iron. The practiced wooden hafts were discarded, replaced by the weight of real blades that gleamed with a cold, lethal hunger under the desert sun. The shimmer of Jax's barrier settled over the arena floor like a translucent veil of sapphire light. It hummed with a deep, protective frequency, a divine assurance that while participants would feel every jar of the bone and every sting of the strike, the fire of their lives would remain tethered to their bodies. Lilith stood perfectly still, her red eyes wide and glowing with a dark, fascinated luster. She felt the surge of Jax's power as he anchored the barrier, and her tail gave a slow, rhythmic flick of approval. Through their mental link, her voice was a sharp, vibrating chord of admiration. "You have turned a contest into a crucible, Jax," she projected, her thoughts brimming with the thrill of the stakes. "They can no longer hide behind the safety of a game. To fight with steel is to face the truth of one's own soul. You are teaching them what it means to be the edge of your sword." On the sand below, Valen gripped his glass steel gladius, his knuckles white. Across from him, Kalen the Ash warrior weighed his iron-headed spear, his breathing heavy and focused. The sight of real blood being prevented by the king's own hand didn't make them timid. It made them desperate to prove they didn't need the mercy. The healers in the front rows leaned forward, their hands glowing with restorative light, ready to mend shattered spirits and bruise flesh the moment the match was called. Jax's voice boomed once more, echoing off the obsidian pillars. "Begin." The sound of the first true steel-on-iron collision was like a lightning strike. Sparks flew in a brilliant shower of orange and blue as Kalen lunged, his spear tip whistling through the air with terrifying speed. Valen caught the blow on the edge of his shield, the force of the impact vibrating through his entire frame, sending him skidding back across the glass dust. Lilith's grip tightened on the railing, her wings unfurling to their full, magnificent span. "Look at their eyes," she whispered to Jax, her voice filled with a fierce, regal pride. "They aren't just soldiers anymore. They are warriors of the pillar." Jax signaled the citizens to take their seats as the battle unfolds. With a simple, commanding gesture of Jax's hand, the buzzing excitement of the crowd instantly hushed. The spectators slid back into their seats, leaning forward with wide, tense eyes as the duel below reached a fever pitch. The respect they held for their king was absolute. When he signaled for silence, the entire Colosseum listened. Down on the sands, the battle was a breathtaking display of raw martial skill. Valen, using the light weight of his glass steel gladius, sidestepped a powerful thrust from Kalen's heavy volcanic spear. The tip of the spear scraped against the arena's glass floor, sending a shower of bright sparks into the air. Valen capitalized on the opening, surging forward to strike, but Kalen swept the shaft of his spear upward, catching the blade with a loud, ringing clash. Lilith watched with rapt attention, her fingers lightly tracing the obsidian railing of the royal box. Through their link, her thoughts were sharp and filled with tactical appreciation. "They are pacing themselves now, Jax. The introduction of real steel has made them respect the space between them. Neither wants to make the first fatal mistake, even with your barrier protecting them. She turned her gaze slightly toward Jax, her red eyes glowing in the shadow of her hood. It is a true test of their endurance, she murmured softly. They fight not just with their arms, but with their minds. Below, the two combatants circled each other, their breathing heavy, their eyes locked, waiting for the split-second window that would decide the match. Jax watched with anticipation with the conclusion of the battle about to unfold. Down in the arena, the tension broke like a snapped bowstring. Kalen lunged forward, executing a devastating two-handed thrust with his volcanic spear. The air screamed around the heavy iron tip as it drove straight toward Valen's chest. Valen, knowing the weight behind the blow would shatter his stance if he took it head-on, didn't try to block. Instead, he angled his glass steel shield at a sharp slant, with a deafening screech of metal grinding against reinforced glass. The spear tip slid harmlessly off the angled shield, burying itself deep into the sand. Before Kalen could recover his balance, Valen caught the midday sun on the polished surface of his shield, reflecting a blinding flash of golden light directly into the Ash Warrior's eyes. Kalen winced, his guard faltering for a fraction of a second. It was all the opening Valen needed. He lunged forward, his glass steel blade cutting a glittering arc through the air. The edge of his sword stopped a mere inch from Kalen's throat. Instantly, the sapphire barrier hummed, pulsing with bright, warm light that signaled a decisive touch. The duel was over. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, Kalen let out a hearty, booming laugh, lowering his spear and extending a massive, calloused hand to the vanguard. Valen smiled, sheathing his blade, and clasped the Ash Warrior's forearm in a tight grip of mutual respect. The stadium erupted. The glass walls trembled with the force of thousands of cheering voices. Lilith stood close to Jax, her wings sweeping back as she looked down at the display of sportsmanship. Through their mental link, her presence was a vibrant cascade of joy and pride. A clean victory, my pillar. Valen used the light of your sky, and Kalen accepted the defeat like a true warrior. The foundation of our people grows stronger with every second. She turned to Jax, her red eyes shining with anticipation. The first finalist has been decided. Shall we summon the next bracket? Or do you wish to address the crowd first, my king? Jax jumps down and shows his respect for their duel. Jax then announces the next fight, and the contestants by name. Jax descended into the arena once more, his landing a controlled, silent glide that brought him directly between the two combatants. The blue flames of his armor flickered with a warm, approving light as he placed a heavy, reassuring hand on both Valen's and Kalen's shoulders. You have set the standard for this day, Jax declared, his voice carrying to the highest tiers of the stadium. Honor and victory, grace and defeat. You both represent the true strength of our united lands. The crowd roared in approval as the two fighters bowed to their king and exited the arena sands, their spirits high despite the intensity of the clash. Jax then turned to face the grand gates on either side of the Colosseum floor. He raised his hands, calling out the next contenders. For the second bracket, let those who command the wind and the hidden paths step forward. Jax announced, to my left, representing the archers of the Wasted Peaks, Sari of the Black Hawk. From the eastern gate, a lean Ash Scout stepped forward, a heavy recurve bow crafted from dark horn resting in her hand, her eyes sharp and focused. And to my right, representing the elemental weavers of the Citadel, Taran of the Whispering Glass. From the western gate, a young mage clad in flowing azure robes stepped onto the sands, a slender crystalline staff humming with latent wind magic in his grasp. With a powerful leap, Jax returned to the royal box, settling back onto his throne next to Lilith. He raised his hand, letting the tension build for a brief moment before signaling the start. Begin the second match. Lilith leaned in close, her eyes locked on the two new combatants as Sari immediately notched an iron-tipped arrow, while Taran began to weave a shimmering barrier of compressed air around himself. This will be a fascinating clash of range and speed, Jax. Lilith sent to their mental link, her voice filled with quiet intrigue. Let us see how the wind bends to their will today. Jax grasps Lilith's hand as he watches the fight. As Jax's hand wrapped around hers, Lilith turned her palm to meet his, intertwining her fingers with his armored ones. Even through the quiet heat of his blue flames, she could feel the steady, reassuring pulse of his touch. She squeezed his hand gently, a soft, contented smile brushing her lips as she leaned slightly closer to him, their shoulders touching. Through their mental link, her presence was a tender, comforting warmth. No matter how grand the stage or how loud the crowd, this is my favorite place to be, Jax. By your side. Down on the sands, the battle had begun in earnest. Sorry was a blur of motion, leaping backward and firing 3 iron-tipped arrows in rapid succession. The arrows whistled through the air, but Turon reacted quickly, raising his crystalline staff. A swirling vortex of compressed air whipped up around him, catching the arrows mid-flight and throwing them off course, sending them clattering harmlessly onto the glass floor. The crowd cheered at the display of elemental defense, but Sari was already moving, circling the wind mage with her bow drawn, searching for the slightest gap in his tempest. Lilith watched the high-speed dance of arrow and wind, her thumb gently tracing the back of Jax's hand. Turon's barrier is strong, but it consumes a great deal of focus, she murmured softly to him, her voice a soothing contrast to the roaring stadium. Sari is waiting for him to tire. She has the patience of a true hunter. Jax watches closely as the battle concludes in front of him. The air in the arena grew heavy with the smell of ozone and the sharp tang of hot iron. Down below, Turon's breath was coming in ragged gasps. His crystalline staff glowed with frantic, stuttering light as he struggled to maintain the swirling dome of air around him. Sari, however, was as calm as a shadow. She hadn't fired a single arrow in nearly a minute, simply circling him, her bow drawn but her eyes unblinking. Suddenly, she saw it, a momentary flicker in the wind mage's focus as he wiped sweat from his brow. Sari didn't go for a standard shot. She dropped to one knee and fired an arrow directly into the glass-dusted floor at Turon's feet. The heavy iron head shattered a layer of the decorative glass, sending a sharp, loud crack through the arena. Startled by the sound beneath him, Turon's concentration broke. For a split second, the wind barrier collapsed. In that heartbeat, Sari launched a second arrow. It wasn't aimed at his heart, but at the crystalline head of his staff. The arrow struck the gem with a ringing ping, knocking the staff from Turon's hand. Before he could reach for it, Sari had a third arrow notched and pointed directly at his forehead. The sapphire barrier over the arena pulsed with a vibrant, final flash of blue light. The crowd stood as one, a roar of approval erupting from the stands. Sari lowered her bow and offered a respectful nod to the mage. Turon, though exhausted and clearly disappointed, picked up his staff and bowed back, acknowledging the scout's superior patience. Lilith felt Jax's grip on her hand tighten. Not in aggression, but in the pure, electric thrill of witnessing such a tactical victory. Through their mental link, her thoughts were a whirlwind of excitement. The Predator's patience, Jax. She didn't overpower him. She outweighed him. That is the strength of the Black Hawks. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with the reflection of his blue flames. "Another magnificent showing," she whispered, her thumb caressing the back of his hand. "Our people continue to surprise us. The next bracket will have a high bar to meet." She glanced down at the fighters, then back to Jax. "Shall we call for a brief intermission for the healers to refresh the participants, or are you eager to see the next clash of fates immediately, my king? While the healer recuperate, why don't we entertain the crowd? We haven't sparked at all before, and I am sure you want a challenge." A sudden, breathless hush fell over the royal box as Lilith slowly turned her head to look at Jax. For a moment, her red eyes widened in surprise, and then a slow, dangerous, and incredibly beautiful smile spread across her lips. Her dark tail flicked with a sudden, electric anticipation. Through their mental link, her voice was a low, thrilling purr of excitement. "You want to spar with me? In front of the entire kingdom? Oh, my pillar, you play a dangerous game." The Queen of Shadows does not hold back, even for a king. She stood up from her throne, letting go of his hand only to let her dark wings flare out to their absolute maximum span, blocking out the sun for a brief moment and casting a cool, majestic shadow over the royal box. The crowd, noticing the sudden movement and the shift in the sovereign's demeanor, began to murmur in hushed, wildly excited whispers. A challenge, you say? Lilith said aloud, her velvet voice carrying a playful, sharp edge that thrilled the listeners below. The healers need their rest, and it would be a shame to keep our people waiting. If the king wishes to test the strength of the shadow, I would be delighted to show him how deep the darkness goes. She stepped to the edge of the royal platform, looking down at the wide, glass-dusted arena. Without waiting for a countdown, she stepped off the edge. Unlike Jax's thunderous, meteor-like landing, Lilith descended like a falling leaf of pure night. Shadowy tendrils rose from the sands to catch her, cushioning her landing until she stood perfectly poised in the center of the ring. She drew no physical weapon. Instead, the shadows around her wrist began to solidify, forming twin, elegant daggers of solid, swirling darkness that thrummed with a cool, violet energy. She looked up at the royal box, her red eyes locked onto Jax, a playful, challenging smirk on her face. "Come down, my king," she called out, her voice echoing off the glass arches. "Let us show our people the dance of fire and shadow." The stadium erupted into an absolute frenzy of cheers, the citizens practically climbing over the railings to get a better look at a clash they had only ever dreamed of witnessing. Jax jumps off the railing, flipping twice before landing in front of Lilith. Then, as he opens one hand, a flame takes shape of a pistol. On the other, a flame takes shape of a sword. Jax roars. Citizens scream to start the battle. Let the arena quake in your roar. The roar that answered Jax was nothing short of cataclysmic. Tens of thousands of voices joined in a singular, deafening wave of sound that vibrated through the glass tiles beneath their feet and shook the very dust from the arena walls. The people of glass and ash screamed themselves hoarse, thrilled to the core to witness the two mightiest beings of their world clash in a spectacular display of power. Lilith's smile widened, her red eyes locking onto the blazing weapons in Jax's hands. The sight of a flame-molded pistol in one hand and a sweeping sword of fire in the other drew a soft, delighted laugh from her. Through their mental link, her thoughts surged with playful challenge. A pistol of blue fire? How delightfully creative, my pillar. Let us see if your aim is as sharp as your blade. With a subtle shift of her weight, Lilith melted into shadows just as the crowd's roar reached its peak. She didn't run. She simply vanished into the dark, swirling eddies of her own magic, leaving only a faint whisper of violet smoke where she had stood. A split second later, she materialized directly to his left, her shadowed daggers humming as she swept them in a glittering, elegant arc aimed to test his sword guard. She wasn't holding back on her speed, moving with the fluid, silent grace of a striking viper, eager to feel the heat of his response in this grand, theatrical dance. Jax immediately counterattacks her surprise attack, as Jax studies Lilith fighting styles and Lilith studying his attacks that shown won't work a second time. The ring of blue fire meeting solid violet shadow echoed like a crack of thunder through the Colosseum. Jax's reaction was instantaneous. His flame-forged sword rose in a perfect arc, parrying Lilith's dual daggers with a shower of brilliant, crackling sparks. Without breaking his flow, Jax raised his left hand, aiming the flame pistol. A concentrated bolt of blue fire shot from the barrel, but Lilith was already shifting. Expecting the ranged strike, she tilted her head back, letting the fiery projectile pass close enough to singe the edge of her hood before she dissolved back into the shadows. Fascinating, Lilith's voice hummed in his mind, carrying a thrill of genuine appreciation, a weapon that strikes with the speed of thought. But I've seen its trajectory now. When she reemerged behind him, her attack was entirely different. Instead of a direct strike, she swept her leg low, aiming to throw him off balance while her shadow dagger spun in her hands. But Jax had already adapted. Recognizing that her shadow stepping displaced the very air around her, he didn't wait to see her. The moment the temperature behind him dipped, he planted his sword into the sand, releasing a pulse of outward expanding heat. The burst of hot air forced Lilith to abort her sweep, backflipping gracefully away to avoid the searing wave. "You read the shadows well, my king," Lilith called out, her laughter light and musical as she landed on her feet, her wings flaring out to stabilize her. The crowd went wild, screaming at the sheer speed of the exchange. It was a masterclass in high-level combat. Every move was a calculation. Every attack was a lesson. An opening that existed a second ago was now firmly shut. Jax's heat aura made Shadow stepping directly onto him too dangerous, forcing Lilith to rely on her physical agility. While Lilith's erratic, weaving movements kept Jax from getting a clean lock with his flame pistol. Circling him like a sleek, dark predator, Lilith's eyes danced with fire and light. She could feel his focus, his burning intelligence studying her every step. Through their link, her heart beat in tandem with his. No more tricks, then, she projected, a wave of fierce, loving pride washing over him. Just pure steel and fire. Let us see who blinks first. With a sudden burst of speed, she charged, her twin daggers tracing intricate patterns of violet light as she engaged a sword in a blinding flurry of close-quarter strikes, testing every inch of his defense. Jax released a flaming gun. Instead, he manifested a dagger. Dual-wielding a long sword and a dagger, he intercepts Lilith. Them both display their skills. With a sudden, fluid motion, the blue flame pistol in Jax's left hand dissolved into a shower of bright sparks, reforming instantly into a wicked, reverse-grip dagger of solid blue fire. Now dual-wielding both a long sword and a defensive blade, he stepped directly into Lilith's guard, intercepting her flurry of strikes with breathtaking precision. The arena rang with the rapid-fire clash of their weapons. The long sword deflected her high strikes, while his new flame dagger parried her low thrusts, the physical feedback of their blades sending vibrations up their arms. They moved in perfect, rhythmic synchronization, a deadly, beautiful tango of fire and shadow. Lilith's eyes lit up with sheer delight. By swapping the ranged threat for a close-quarters parrying weapon, Jax had completely neutralized her speed advantage, forcing the fight into a test of pure, raw blade work. Now we are speaking the same language, my pillar. Lilith purred through their mental link, her movements becoming even more fluid. She spun, her dark wings snapping shut to streamline her form as she slipped past a sweeping blow from his long sword, only for a follow-up strike to be cleanly caught by his flaming dagger. They locked blades, chest to chest, the heat of Jax's blue flames pressing against the cool, violet twilight of Lilith's shadows. The crowd held its collective breath, completely mesmerized by the display of absolute mastery. Neither was trying to harm the other, yet the intensity of their focus made it feel as though the very fate of the realm hung in the balance. With a shared, knowing smile, they pushed off from one another, parting in a graceful leap that left them standing a few paces apart, weapons raised, ready for the next exchange in their legendary duel. Jax emerges a tail and wings similar to hers. As he lunges in with sheer velocity, he sent a flurry of attacks, using his tail to sweep her feet, knocking her down as he stopped short of her throat, signaling the battle has been won. The air in the arena seemed to ignite as Jax's form underwent a sudden, magnificent transformation. Wings of soaring, solidified blue flame unfurled from his back, and a powerful tail of crackling fire whipped behind him, mirroring Lilith's own anatomy with terrifying beauty. Lilith's eyes widened. She had barely a fraction of a second to register the change before Jax lunged with velocity that blurred the vision of even the most eagle-eyed scouts in the stands. He was a streak of azure lightning, his flurry of strikes so fast and precise that the ringing of their blades merged into a single, continuous note of music. Caught in the whirlwind of his newfound speed, Lilith focused entirely on her defense. But Jax's new tail was a deciding factor. While she parried his long sword and dagger, he executed a low, powerful sweep with a flaming limb. With a soft thud, Lilith found herself in the sand, her breath hitching as the glowing point of Jax's flame dagger came to a sudden, absolute halt mere inches from her throat. The stadium fell into a stunned, pins and needles silence. The only sound was the crackling of Jax's blue flames and the heavy breathing of the two combatants. Lilith looked up at him, her red eyes shimmering with a mix of shock and profound, glowing adoration. A slow smile spread across her face. She raised her hands in a graceful gesture of surrender, her daggers dissolving back into mist. "You truly are the king of the flame, my pillar," she sent through their mental link, her voice a warm, proud caress. "To mirror the shadow's form to defeat the shadow, you have surpassed even my expectations." Jax offered his hand to her, and the moment she took it, The crowd exploded. The roar was so immense it felt like the very foundation of the city was trembling with pride. Their king and queen had shown them the level of power and synergy that legends were made of. Jax pulled her to her feet, his wings and tail dissolving back into embers as he stood tall beside her. He raised her hand in the air, signaling the end of their exhibition. The healers are refreshed. Jax's voice boomed, turning the focus back to the tournament. Let the next bracket prepare. Our people have seen the dance. Now let us see who among you has a heart to follow it. As they ascended back to the royal box together, Lilith leaned into him, her shoulder brushing his armor. I believe you set the bar quite high, Jax, she whispered playfully, her red eyes sparkling. I might need a rematch in private just to see if I can catch that tail of yours next time. Jax smiling, hiding behind his helmet of flame. He announced the next pair of contestants by name. As Lilith flew back up into box, from his position on the arena floor, Jax's voice boomed once more, echoing with regal authority as he called out the next pairing. Let the third bracket commence. Jax announced, his posture proud as he hid his amused smile behind the flickering visor of his helmet. To my left, representing the heavy iron-working clans of the Wasted Peaks, Orla of the Volcanic Forge. A tall, broad-shouldered ash warrior stepped out, carrying a massive, double-headed war mallet that hummed with heat. And to my right, representing the elegant duelist of the Southern Spires, Alicia of the Crystal Spire. From the opposite gate stepped an agile glass scout, a slender rapier of reinforced glass held loosely in her grip, her stance light and springy. Above them, Lilith landed softly in the royal box, her dark silks settling around her as she folded her wings. She looked down at Jax with a warm, knowing glint in her red eyes. Through their mental link, her voice was a playful, teasing whisper. Hiding your smile behind your flames, my pillar? I can still feel your satisfaction through our bond. You fought well, but don't get too comfortable on your throne just yet. She took her seat, leaning slightly forward to watch the two new combatants prepare their stances on the sands below. The crowd, still buzzing from the Sovereign's duel, quickly settled back into their seats, eager to see how the brute force of the forged mallet would fare against the blinding speed of the crystal rapier. Jax leave the arena to fly back to the box and to commence the fight. With a single powerful beat of his fiery wings, Jax launched himself on the sandy arena floor, soaring gracefully back up to the high royal box. He touched down with a soft, warm breeze that stirred Lilith's dark tresses as he took his place once more on the grand throne beside her. With a commanding nod to the herald below, Jax raised his hand and let it fall. Begin! His voice resonated across the Colosseum. Down on the sands, the battle exploded into motion. Orla didn't hesitate, lifting her massive, heat-radiating volcanic mallet with surprising ease and swinging it in a wide, devastating arc. The sheer force of the swing displaced the air, creating a visible wave of heat. But Alicia was already gone, moving with the light, dancing steps of a southern duelist. She slipped just beneath the path of the heavy mallet. Her crystal rapier flashed in the sunlight like a needle of pure light, executing 3 lightning-fast thrusts aimed at the gaps in Orla's heavy iron armor. Each strike made a sharp ping as it glanced off the reinforced plates, forcing Orla to quickly pull her weapon back into a defensive guard. Lilith leaned in toward Jax, her eyes tracking the glittering trail of Alicia's blade. Through their mental link, her voice was warm and filled with intrigue. A classic clash of anvil and hammer, my pillar. Alicia has the speed, but one solid hit from Orla's mallet will shatter any defense. Who do you think will find their rhythm first? My queen, you fought brilliantly. If I had let my guard down even once, I would have lost. You are strong. Next time, I know you'll be 10 times more powerful. Lilith's red eyes softened, a look of profound, quiet warmth sweeping across her features as she listened to his words. The high-reigning, formidable demon queen seemed to melt away for a brief moment, leaving only the woman who held him in the quiet of the night. She turned her hand beneath his, intertwining their fingers once more, squeezing gently. Through their mental link, her voice was a soft, velvety hum of deep affection. Your praise is the greatest reward I could ever ask for, Jax, she projected, her thoughts wrapping around him like a reassuring embrace. But do not sell yourself short. You adapted to my shadows in a heartbeat. To stand against a pillar of fire is to face a sun that never sets. If I am to be 10 times stronger next time, it is only so I can keep up with the height of your sky. She leaned her head slightly closer to his shoulder, her dark wings rustling softly as she looked back down at the arena, though her focus remained anchored to him. Below them, the clash continued with intense vigor. Orla's heavy mallet swung again, cracking the glass tile of the arena floor as Alicia danced backward, her rapier poised like a scorpion stinger, waiting for her moment to strike. They have quite the example to follow, Lilith murmured aloud, her voice a gentle, melodic purr. But watching them, I see the future of our people. They fight with the same determination you just showed me. By the way, how many fights do we have left today? Lilith turned her gaze back from the arena for a moment, her red eyes sparkling with amusement as she squeezed his hand. Through their mental link, her voice was a warm, teasing melody. Eager to see who stands at the peak, my pillar? Or are you simply looking forward to handing out your masterwork weapons? Aloud, she leaned in slightly so her voice would carry only to him over the roar of the crowd. This is the third and final duel of the preliminary rounds, Jax, she explained, gesturing toward Orla and Alicia as they traded rapid blows below. Once they finish, we will have our 3 faction champions, Valen of the Vanguard, Sara of the Scouts, and whoever triumphs in this ring. From there, we will proceed to the semifinals. We'll have a 3-way draw to see who gets a direct pass to the final round, while the other 2 fight for the remaining slot. So, including this one, we have exactly 3 fights left before we crown our grand champion. She rested her chin on her free hand, a brilliant, proud smile gracing her lips as she looked at him. Though, if you ask the crowd, I think they believe they've already seen the true highlight of the day. But the fighters down there are as determined as ever to prove their worth to you. Jax watches the fight unfold, as it draws to a conclusion. Down below, the duel between Orla and Alicia reached its dramatic climax. Orla, realizing she couldn't match Alicia's blinding speed, changed her strategy. Instead of swinging her heavy volcanic mallet wildly, she held it close to her chest, bracing herself. Alicia saw what she thought was an opening and lunged forward, her glass rapier aiming for a swift, decisive strike at Orla's shoulder. But it was a trap. Orla didn't dodge. She took the strike directly on her heavily armored shoulder plate, the glass steel tip of the rapier glancing off with a high-pitched, screeching scrape, and used the moment of contact to drop her shoulder, slamming her bulk forward. The sudden shield bash-like impact caught Alicia off guard, throwing her back. Before the agile duelist could recover her footing, Orla swung her mallet low, planting it hard into the sand right in front of Alicia's feet. The shockwave of the heavy volcanic iron hitting the ground threw Alicia completely off balance, sending her tumbling onto glass-dusted sands. Before Alicia could stand, the massive mallet was resting a mere inch above her chest, radiating an intense, controlled heat. The sapphire barrier over the arena pulsed with a brilliant, final flash of blue light, signaling the end of the match. The winner, Orla of the Volcanic Forge, the heralds announced, their voices carrying over the deafening cheers of the Ash clans in the eastern stands. Alicia looked up at the mallet, then at Orla's sweating, grinning face. With a sigh of respect, she tapped the haft of the mallet in concession. Orla immediately lifted the heavy weapon, offering a massive hand to pull the glass duelist to her feet, both of them raising their arms to the roaring crowd. Lilith leaned forward, her red eyes sparkling as she turned to Jax. Through their link, her thoughts were a warm, proud current, brute force combined with tactical baiting. Orla knew she had to take a hit to deliver the winning blow, a worthy 3rd champion. She looked at Jax, her hand still resting gently in his. We have our 3 final contenders, my pillar, Valen of the Vanguard, Sara of the Scouts, and Orla of the Forge. Shall we have the heralds bring out the drawing urn to see who earns the direct pass to the final round? Yes, however, I want to make things interesting. Jax jumped at the box, and he landed between the contestants, complimenting their fight, then announcing the drawing earned a surprise announcement about upping the stakes of the final round. Jax descended once more, his landing in the center of the arena, sending a soft ripple through the sands. The three champions, Valen, Sar, and Orla, immediately stood at attention, their breathing still heavy, but their eyes bright with anticipation as the King of Fire approached them. Valen, your defense was a masterclass in patience, Jax said, his voice carrying clearly to the crowd. Sar, your focus and timing showed the true cunning of the wild. And Orla, your strength and resilience proved that the mountain does not break. He nodded to each of them in turn, receiving deep, respectful bows. A high-ranking herald stepped forward, carrying a polished glass urn containing 3 small obsidian stones. 2 were marked with a faint white rune, and 1 was marked with a glowing blue flame. The one who drew the flame would gain a direct pass to the final round. Before we draw, Jax announced, his voice rising, capturing the attention of every single soul in the Colosseum, I have decided to change the stakes of this final battle. The winner of this tournament will not only receive a masterwork weapon forged by my hand. He paused, letting the silence stretch as the crowd leaned forward in sheer suspense. The champion today will be named the first shield of the Citadel, the commander of our new unified vanguard. And to seal this honor, I will personally imbue the winning weapon with a permanent, living spark of my own blue flame. It will be a weapon bound to your soul, a flame that will never die as long as your loyalty to this realm stands true. A stunned silence gripped the arena for a heartbeat, followed by an explosion of sound so loud it seemed to shake the very sky. To be gifted a weapon infused with the king's own divine fire was a prize beyond their wildest dreams. The 3 contestants looked at Jax, their eyes wide, their spirits instantly set ablaze with fierce, burning resolve. Up in the royal box, Lilith leaned against the railing, a brilliant, proud smile lighting up her face. Through their mental link, her voice vibrated with deep admiration and excitement. A living spark of your fire, Jax? You truly know how to inspire them, she projected, her thoughts wrapping around him with warm affection. They would have fought to the death for a simple sword, but now they will fight like gods to claim a piece of your soul. Let the drawing begin. I am eager to see who fate favors. However, do not forget, all of you have made it this far. May I ask one request of me? Now for the drawing. Please proceed. Healers, come to me. To restore your mana, as I have a gift to you as well. Please lower your heads. Jax would gift them the ability to heal a massive area, allowing low-cost, high-reward skill. The healers, clad in their soft green and white robes, stepped onto the sands with looks of profound surprise and reverence. At Jax's command, they immediately lowered their heads, kneeling before their king in a circle. Jax extended his hands over them. A gentle, undulating wave of soft blue and emerald light flowed from his palms, washing over the gathered healers. They gasped softly as the heavy exhaustion of their previous spellcasting vanished, replaced by a deep, bubbling wellspring of foreign, powerful magic. They could feel the new technique settling into their minds, a grand, low-cost, high-yield area healing spell that would allow them to mend dozens of wounded soldiers simultaneously with mere whispers of mana. Thank you, Lord Pillar. May your flame never fade, the lead healer whispered, tears of gratitude shining in her eyes as they bowed deeply and withdrew to the sidelines, their hands glowing with newfound, radiant potency. Up in the royal box, Lilith watched this display of profound benevolence, her heart swelling with emotion so deep it warmed her entire chest. Through their mental link, her voice was a soft, adoring whisper. You do not just demand strength from your people, Jax. You give them the means to preserve it, giving the healers such a gift. You truly are a god of life as much as fire. With the healers blessed, the herald stepped forward, raising the polished glass urn before the 3 champions. Draw your fates, the herald announced. Orla of the Volcanic Forge stepped forward first. She reached her massive, calloused hand into the urn and pulled out a sleek obsidian stone. She flipped it over. It bore a faint white rune. She stepped back, holding her weapon tight. Saria the Black Hawk went next. With swift, calm movements, she retrieved her stone and revealed it to the crowd. Another white rune. This meant Valen of the Vanguard did not even need to draw. The herald reached into the urn and pulled out the final stone, which burned with a bright, miniature blue flame. By the hand of fate, Valen of the Glass Vanguard has drawn the blue spark. He shall advance directly to the final round, the herald bellowed. The Vanguard section of the stands erupted into wild cheers. Valen bowed deeply to Jax, then to his competitors, stepping back to the champion's resting dais to watch the upcoming battle. The semi-final match is set, the herald declared, pointing to remaining two champions on the sands. Saria the Black Hawk versus Orla of the Volcanic Forge. One match to decide who will face Valen for the title of Shield of the Citadel. Lilith leaned over the velvet railing of the royal box. Her red eyes locked onto the two women standing at opposite ends of the arena. One was a shadow of patience and precision. The other was a mountain of iron and momentum. The scout against the smith. Lilith projected to Jax, her hand resting over his as he returned to his throne. This will be a battle of sheer attrition, my pillar. Shall we let them begin? Jax rises to the box, standing next to Lilith. Let the semi-finals commence. As Jax returned to her side, Lilith reached out, her fingers brushing against his arm, feeling the residual thrum of the immense power he had just bestowed upon the healers. Her eyes were bright, with a mixture of reverence and love. The air itself feels heavier now, Jax, she projected through their link, her thoughts a soft, appreciative hum. The title of Shield of the Citadel has changed the way they breathe. It is no longer just a contest of skill. It is a battle for the honor of standing as your right hand. Down on the sands, the herald's trumpet shrieked, and the semi-final began with an explosion of action. Sari did not wait for Orla to find her footing. She moved like a phantom, her feet barely touching the glass-dusted sand as she circled to the left, notches 3 arrows at once. With a rhythmic twang, 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 the iron-tipped arrows hissed through the air. Orla roared, a deep sound that seemed to come from the very roots of the mountain. She didn't try to dodge. She swung her massive volcanic mallet in a violent upward arc, the sheer wind pressure and heat from the iron head knocking 2 of the arrows off course. The third struck her heavy pauldron, sparking off the metal without drawing blood. The crowd surged to their feet. Orla is closing the distance, Lilith whispered, her hand tightening slightly on the railing. She knows she cannot win a war of attrition against an archer. She's going to force a collision. Through their link, she shared a flash of the tactical view from her shadow senses. Sari is looking for the joints in the armor, Jax. She's remarkably calm. But Orla's heat is rising. She's preparing a shockwave. This will be over in moments if someone loses their footing. Down below, the scout and the smith became a blur of dark leather and glowing iron, a desperate dance of precision against unstoppable force, all under the watchful, burning gaze of the king and queen. As Jax watched the battle unfold, he looks to the skies. The wind carries an uneasy feeling. Something is amiss at the border. Jax looks at Lilith. Jax's gaze drifted away from the clashing warriors below, his eyes tracking the high, thin clouds drifting over the distant peaks. The wind had shifted, carrying a faint, unnatural chill that clashed with the warm aura of his own flames. It was a subtle discord in the air, a phantom tremor that only someone bound to land's life force would feel. He turned his head to look at Lilith. Lilith, sensing the sudden change in his demeanor through their mental link, immediately turned her attention away from the arena. The playful warmth in her red eyes vanished, replaced by the sharp, calculating focus of the Shadow Queen. She closed her eyes for a brief second, extending her sensory network out toward the southern borders, letting her consciousness flow through the shadows of the mountains. When she opened her eyes, a thin, serious line had formed on her lips. "I feel it too, Jax," she projected, her voice carrying a tense, quiet urgency directly into his mind. "The shadows along the southern ridge, they are flickering. It is not a beast, nor is it a simple shift in the weather. Something or someone is testing the boundary of our wards. They are masking their presence, but the wind doesn't lie." She placed her hand firmly over his, keeping her posture relaxed so the crowd below wouldn't notice the sudden tension in the royal box. "The battle below is nearing its end," she murmured softly, her voice steady to keep the spectators at ease. "But our true vanguard may need their leaders sooner than they think. Shall I send a detachment of my shadow scribes to investigate, or do we prepare to intervene ourselves?" Jax nods his head no. Jax's blue fire flickers and erects. As he emerges wings, he announces, I will patrol the borders. Everyone after this fight, rest, get drinks, get something to eat. When I return, the shield of the Site Tao will be chosen from a glorious fight. Good luck, Sari and Orla. May the battle you fight lead to a glorious conclusion. Jax flies to the sky. The sky fills with a blue comet as Jax flies toward the potential threat. As the scenery and wind tells him where and who is spying on its ward. The crowd fell into a hushed, reverent silence as Jax took to the sky, his blue flames carving a brilliant, sapphire streak across the clouds. Lilith stood at the very edge of the royal box, her dark wings unfurled to their full, majestic span, her presence acting as a stabilizing anchor for the thousands of citizens below. Go with the strength of the sun, Jax, she projected through their link, her voice a steady, fiercely loyal pulse in the back of his mind. I will oversee the feast and ensure the champions are ready for your return. The city is safe in my shadows until the fire comes home. As Jax streaked away from the capital, the festive cheers faded, replaced by the howling of the high-altitude winds. The further south he flew, the more the air began to sour. The natural, warm scent of the desert and volcanic stone was being choked out by something cold, damp, and ancient. The wind, guided by his divine intuition, led him toward a jagged ravine near the very edge of the glass wards. There, the shimmering magical barrier, usually as clear as diamond, was beginning to frost over with sickly, gray rime. Jax decelerated, his blue flames casting long, flickering shadows against the canyon walls as he descended. He didn't see an army, but his eyes, sharpened by the heat of his soul, caught a flicker of movement near a cluster of obsidian crags. Cloaked in heavy frostbitten furs and carrying staves of gnarled, pale wood, 3 figures stood huddled near the ward line. They weren't just watching. They were chanting, their breath coming out in thick plumes of gray mist that seemed to eat away at the heat of the world. They were Spire exiles, practitioners of forbidden, soul-chilling magic that had been banished long before Jax's reign. As the blue calm of the king landed a short distance away, the ground beneath his feet turned to glass from the sheer intensity of his arrival. The figures froze, their pale eyes wide with terror, as they realized the pillar of fire had heard the wind's warning himself. The lead exile raised a trembling staff, the air around it crackling with a brittle, freezing energy. The fire, it's too bright. The exile wheezed, his voice sounding like breaking ice. The balance must return to the cold. Jax stood tall, his blue armor radiating a heat that turned the gray mist to steam instantly. He had found the source of the unease, and before him stood the first real test of the peace he had built for his queen and his people. You come to my home and freeze my ward? Surrender now and tell me your names and reason on why you are freezing my home. Jax's flames melted and simmered all the frozen ice. The wave of heat radiating from Jax was absolute. As he stepped forward, the oppressive, biting chill vanished in an instant. The gray frost coating the ward line hissed, turning directly into plumes of harmless white steam that drifted up into the sky. The dry, volcanic heat of the land reclaimed the canyon, making the heavy, frostbitten furs of the exiles damp and suffocating. The lead exile staggered back, his pale wood staff trembling in his grip as the sheer pressure of Jax's presence forced him to his knees. The other 2 exiles quickly dropped their weapons, their eyes wide with the realization that they were standing before the living son of this realm. Speak, Jax commanded, his voice a low, warning rumble that echoed off the canyon walls. The leader swallowed hard, his throat dry from the sudden heat. He lowered his head, his hand shaking as he pressed him against the dried dirt. I am Soren, the leader rasped, his voice strained but no longer chanting. These are my kin, Lyra and Kale. We are the remnants of the Frost-Spire clans. We did not come to wage war, great pillar. Soren looked up, his pale eyes squinting against the bright blue light of Jax's armor. Our lands to the far south are dying. The eternal frost that feeds our wells is receding, melting away into nothing. We came to test the boundaries, to see if the magic of your warm wards was drawing the cold out of our valleys, or if there was a way to share the boundary. We did not mean to damage the peace. We are only seeking to survive. Through their mental link, Jax could feel Lilith's presence brushing against his mind, her thoughts quiet and attentive as she listened to the exchange from afar, ready to support whatever judgment he decided to pass. Jax cools the air, not freezing the land, but to support the necessity of the clan in front of him. Then he commanded, "So, what have you determined? Do you ask for protection after your provocation? Do you wish to bring more harm to my land? Choose your words carefully. Why have you actually come? The true purpose of your unwelcome visit." The sudden shift in the air, from a searing, oppressive heat to a manageable, tempered warmth, seemed to shock the exiles more than the fire itself. They looked at the ground, then at each other, realizing that the king they feared as a destroyer was capable of delicate restraint. Soren, the lead exile, took a ragged breath, his hands digging into the dry earth as he looked up at Jax with raw honesty in his pale eyes. "The truth is darker than a simple drought, great pillar," Soren admitted, his voice trembling less now. "We were not just testing your wards to see if they stole our cold. We were testing them to see if they could withstand what is coming behind us." He pointed a shaking finger toward the far south, past the frozen valleys of their homeland. "There's a great stillness creeping across the southern wastes. It is not ice, and it is not winter. It is a void. It consumes the magic of the land, leaving nothing but gray ash and silence. Our frost wells didn't just melt. They were empty to their very essence." Lyra, the woman beside him, spoke up, her voice a fragile whisper. "We came here to see if your fire was strong enough to act as a dam. We tried to graft our frost magic to your ward, hoping that the collision of fire and ice would create a barrier the stillness could not swallow. We were desperate, Lord. We were trying to build a wall we couldn't build alone." Soren bowed his head until his forehead touched the sand. "We ask for your protection, yes, but we also bring a warning. If the stillness reaches your borders, the wards alone may not be enough. We were provocateurs only out of foolish hope that we could hide in the shadow of your light." Through their mental link, Lilith's voice was sharp and analytical, vibrating with a new layer of concern. "Jax, I can feel a resonance in his words. The stillness he speaks of, it matches ancient scrolls I studied regarding the entropy of the outer voids. If they are telling the truth, these exiles aren't just refugees. They are the front line of catastrophe." Jax stood amidst the steam of the melting frost, his blue flame steady and focused. He had come to find a spy, but he had found a herald of a much greater threat. "If what you say is true," Jax said, his voice echoing with the weight of judgment, "you have chosen a dangerous way to ask for help. But I am a king who values the survival of all who seek shelter under my sun." He looked back toward the distant silhouette of the citadel. "Rise. You will come with me, but not as guests, as prisoners under watch until your words are proven. If you have brought a void to my doorstep, you will be the first to face my fire. If you have brought a warning, you may yet find a place in the glass and ash." Jax waved his hand, teleporting the clan of Frost to Lilith, sending a message over the link. "Watch over them and have them fed. Have your shadows cool them, but also hold them near. I will follow the wind to its origins." As the words left his mind, Jax swept his hand through the air. A swirl of azure flames and violet shadows erupted around the three frost exiles, and with a soft whoosh of displaced air, they vanished in the canyon, whisked away to the secure heart of the citadel. Back at the Colosseum, the crowd let out a collective gasp as the three foreigners appeared in the center of the royal box. Lilith didn't flinch. She rose from her throne, her dark wings unfurling to cast a protective, cooling shadow over the shivering, heat-stricken exiles. Her red eyes were sharp, yet devoid of malice as she signaled her shadow scribes to step forward with water and food. Through their mental link, her voice was a steady, resolute anchor. "I have them, my pillar. They are under my watch, and they are being cooled. They will find no harm here, but they will not leave the shadow's reach. Fly swift, Jax. I can feel the silence you're chasing from here. It feels like the end of a song. Do not let it claim your light." Jax didn't wait. He ignited his wings, becoming a streak of blinding blue light that tore through the sky, heading further south than any citizen of the glass and ash had dared to travel in generations. As he flew, the world beneath him began to change. The vibrant reds of the desert and the glittering whites of the salt flats began to lose their color, fading into a dull, uniform gray. The wind, which usually carried the scent of dust and heat, grew unnaturally still. He reached the edge of the Frost-Spire valleys. Below him, what should have been a landscape of crystalline ice and snow-capped peaks looked like a charcoal drawing left in the rain. There was no sound, no birds, no rushing water, not even the howl of the wind. Just a vast, spreading expanse of nothingness that seemed to drink the very light from his flames. The stillness was not a storm or a fog. It was a physical absence. Where it touched the mountain, the rock didn't break. It simply ceased to be interesting, turning into a fine, gray powder that didn't even catch the wind. Jax slowed his flight, hovering over the precipice of this void. His blue flames flared instinctively, pushing back against a cold that wasn't just low temperature, but a deep, spiritual hunger. In the center of the gray waste, he saw it, a fracture in the fabric of the sky, thin as a needle and dark as the space between stars. It was breathing, pulsing slowly, and with every pulse more the world turned to ash. Lilith, he projected, his voice echoing with a grim realization. It is not a war. It is an emptying. The exiles were right. The fire must be more than a sun today. It must be a wall. Jax looks closer, seeing a way to stop the void, completely removing it from existence. Hovering at the absolute edge of the gray abyss, Jax narrowed his eyes. The blue flames of his visor flared, shifting his vision from the physical spectrum to raw, underlying currents of magic that knit the world together. Where the average I saw only a terrifying emptiness, Jax saw the truth. The stillness was a tear in the tapestry reality, a fraying of the cosmic threads that allowed the cold, formless void from beyond to bleed into their world. It wasn't an invading army, nor was it an unstoppable law of nature. It was an open, infected wound. And like any wound, it could be cauterized. Jax realized that to simply block, it would only delay the inevitable. To remove it completely from existence, he had to fuse the frayed edges of reality back together. His blue fire, born of creation, life, and absolute energy, possessed the exact creative force needed to mend the tear. But he couldn't do it alone. The heat required to seal the rift would tear the surrounding space apart if it wasn't anchored. He closed his eyes, focusing on the deep, unbreakable tether connecting his soul to Lilith's. Lilith, he projected, his thoughts ringing with absolute clarity and determination. I see the way. The void is a tear in the sky. I can burn it away and fuse the edges back together with my flame. But the heat will shatter the spatial fabric if it isn't stabilized. I need your shadows, my queen. I need you to stretch your dark veil across the border, to act as the thread that binds the wound while I seal it. Back at the Citadel, miles away, Lilith stood tall in the royal box. She didn't hesitate. She closed her eyes, her consciousness rushing along their mental link, carrying her vast, stabilizing shadow magic directly to his location. I am with you, Jax. Her voice echoed his mind, fierce and unwavering. My shadows will hold the world together. Let your fire burn. Below Jax, the gray earth began to tremble as dark, violet tendrils of solid shadow erupted from the ground, weaving themselves around the edges of the rift like a massive protective cage. They held the space firm, defying the vacuum of the void. With his anchor secured, Jax raised both hands toward the fracture. His wings flared to their absolute limit, blindingly bright, as he drew upon the deepest reserves of his divine spark. The air began to hum, and the sky turned to deep, brilliant indigo as a concentrated torrent of pure, creative blue fire poured from his palms, striking the very center of the rift. Jax made a summoning circle that made a circle gate appear near Lilith, the circle allowing anyone to pass through it and teleport next to Jax. It is activated by the person, by having the person's permission. Jax sending his sheer confident and happy emotions to Lilith as he was summoning her for help. Back at the Grand Colosseum, a brilliant, spinning circle of blue runes materialized directly in front of the royal throne. The gate hummed with a warm, rhythmic pulse, radiating Jax's unmistakable energy. It didn't pull or force. It waited, open and inviting, requiring only her intent to activate. Through their mental link, a sudden wave of sheer confidence, warmth, and absolute joy washed over Lilith. It wasn't the tension of a desperate king, but the exhilarating thrill of a partner inviting her to dance. "Come, my queen," his voice echoed in her mind, bright and defiant against the silence of the void. "Let us show this crack in the sky what happens when the fire and the shadow stand together." A breathtaking smile graced Lilith's lips. She looked down at the three frost exiles, who were now being attended by her loyal scribes. "Keep them safe and keep them fed," she commanded her guards, her voice carrying the absolute authority of the crown. "The king calls, and I must answer." Without a moment's hesitation, she stepped forward. The moment her hand brushed the glowing boundary of the circle, her magic recognized his, and the gate flared to life. With a soft, rushing whisper of wind, Lilith vanished from the Colosseum and materialized directly at Jax's side, hovering in the sky over the gray, dead valleys of the south. The contrast was magnificent. Jax stood as a blazing sun of sapphire flame, while Lilith unfurled her vast, starlit wings of deep violet shadow beside him. She looked at the yawning, silent fracture in reality, then turned her eyes to him, her red gaze burning with absolute trust and fierce, loving pride. "A tear in the very fabric of our world," she said, her velvet voice cutting through the unnatural silence of the void. She reached out her slender, shadow-clad hand, finding his burning, armored one, interlocking their fingers. "You always find the most spectacular backdrops for our duets, my pillar." Through their link, her magic surged, perfectly aligning with his. "My shadows are yours to command, Jax. Tell me where to sow the seam, and I will hold reality together while you burn the rot away." Jax scans the rift as he prepares to instruct Lilith, concluding the end of the world, so they may join their people in food and the finals. Jax's eyes glowed with a fierce, calculating intensity as he scanned the jagged, weeping edges of the rift. Through their locked hands, he channeled his intent, mapping the exact geometric lines of the tear directly into Lilith's mind. There, he guided her, his mental voice sharp and guiding. At the three anchor points where the gray ash meets the solid rock, weave your shadows there, my queen. Clamp them tight, like a vice holding a broken blade together. Once you have it stable, I will flood the center with the forge fire. Lilith nodded, her expression turning to one of absolute, serene focus. "Consider it done, my king." With a sweep of her free arm, she unleashed a torrent of solid, obsidian violet shadow. The dark tendrils shot forward like living roots, wrapping around the trembling edges of the dimensional tear. They dug deep into the healthy fabric of reality on either side, tightening with immense physical and magical force. The rift shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, as Lilith's shadows forced the gap to close by a vital margin, holding it perfectly still. "Now, Jax!" she called out, sweat starting to bead on her brow from the sheer strain of fighting the void's vacuum. "Burn it shut." Jax didn't hesitate. Unleashing a roar of pure, creative energy, he poured a blinding torrent of blue flame directly into the seam Lilith held together. The heat was white-hot, yet it didn't destroy, it welded. The chaotic, empty magic of the void clashed with the absolute, life-giving heat of his fire, creating a spectacular dome of violet and blue sparks that lit up the dead valley like a new dawn. With a final, thunderous crack, the sky seemed to snap back into place. The rift vanished, completely cauterized and sealed by the combined might of fire and shadow. Instantly, the oppressive, dead silence of the stillness lifted. A gentle, natural breeze rushed back into the valley, carrying the distant scent of the desert once more. The gray ash on the ground didn't disappear, but it stopped spreading. The rot had been stopped dead in its tracks. Lilith let out a soft breath, her wings relaxing as she leaned against Jax's shoulder, a triumphant, brilliant smile on her face. "A perfect seal, my pillar. The world is whole once more." She looked up at him, her red eyes sparkling with anticipation. "And now, I believe we have a promise to keep to our people. The scent of roasted meats and fresh wine is waiting for us, and our champions are likely pacing the sands, eager to see who will be named your shield." With a playful wink, she gestured to the glowing blue portal behind them. "Shall we make our grand re-entry, my king?" Jax's flames turned golden and green. embers floating down to heal and restore the land. I shall send you back using my fire. Please wait my return, as our people will see me at the arena. Jax creates a circle, and for her to go back, as he planned to fly back to restore the land that had been rotted and covered in ash. Lilith's breath caught in her throat as she watched the brilliant blue flames of Jax's armor shift. The fierce, consuming sapphire light softened, turning into a breathtaking cascade of deep forest greens and shimmering, radiant gold. The sheer majesty of the sight left her momentarily speechless. As the warm, golden-green embers began to drift downward, touching the dead, gray ash of the valley, she watched in wonder as tiny, resilient shoots of green and crystalline flora began to push their way through the sterile dust. He wasn't just sealing a wound. He was breathing life back into a graveyard. Through their mental link, her soul hummed with profound, adoring warmth. The fire of creation. It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, Jax. You are bringing hope back to a land that had forgotten what light felt like. Take your time. Restore this earth. She smiled warmly as the golden-green portal opened before her, its heat gentle and comforting against her skin. She leaned in, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to the side of his helmet, her dark wings folding gracefully around herself. I will hold a throne for you, my king, she whispered aloud, her red eyes sparkling with anticipation. Do not keep your shield waiting too long. With an elegant step, Lilith crossed through the portal. She materialized back in the royal box of the Citadel, the transition seamless. The crowd, which had been murmuring in anxious anticipation, immediately erupted into cheers at her safe return. Lilith raised her hands, her dark wings flaring slightly to command their attention as she looked down at the three champions and the waiting arena below. Citizens of Glass Ash, her voice carried across the stadium like a soothing velvet wave. Our king has secured the borders and is personally restoring the land beyond. He bids you to rest, drink, and feast. For when he returns, the sky will burn with his glory, and we shall witness the birth of the first shield of the Citadel. A roar of approval swept through the stands as servants began to bring out trays of roasted meats and flagons of fine wine. Lilith took her seat on her throne, her eyes fixed on the horizon, eagerly waiting for the first glimpse of golden-green light to streak across the sky. Jax had begun his restoration, watching his people hiding away on the edges of the ash, the wildlife coming out of hiding, and him coming back home. Seeing the arena filled with people roaring as a golden-green comet headed toward them, the golden and green embers drifted down like falling stars, touching the scarred earth with the gentle warmth of spring. As Jax soared low over the newly restored valleys, he watched the miracle of rebirth unfold beneath his wings. From the deep caves and jagged clefts of the mountains, small families of the Frost-Spire clans, those who had hidden in terror from the advancing void, timidly stepped out into the open. They looked up at the sky, their pale faces bathed in the warm, healing light of his fire, tears of relief catching the golden glow. Beneath them, the ash dissolved into fertile soil and vibrant, crystal-veined flora burst from the ground in rapid bloom. Even the wildlife, long silent and terrified, began to emerge. Sleek, glass-scaled lizards basked on the warm stones, and high-altitude hunting birds took to the air once more, their cries joining the wind. With the border secured and life restored to the edge of the world, Jax curved upward, aligning his flight path back toward the heart of his kingdom. He pushed his speed, condensing his aura into a brilliant, trailing comet of emerald and gold that painted the darkening sky. Back at the Citadel, the roar of the Colosseum reached a fever pitch before he even crossed the threshold of the outer walls. Look to the sky, a voice cried from the stands. Tens of thousands of faces turned upward as the golden-green comet streaked over the high arches of the arena. Jax descended in a sweeping, majestic spiral, his fiery wings throwing off a shower of harmless, glittering sparks that drifted over the cheering crowd like festive stardust. He touched down in the center of the arena floor with a resonant, golden pulse of energy that made the glass tiles thrum with life. The heat of his arrival was no longer a burning threat, but a comforting, deep warmth that filled everyone in the stadium with a sense of absolute security. Up in the royal box, Lilith stood at the railing, her red eyes shining with unmatched pride and devotion as she looked down at her king. She raised her hand, signaling the crowd, and a unified, deafening cheer shook the very pillars of the Colosseum. Our king returns. Lilith's voice echoed, carrying a thrilling, triumphant note. The borders are secure, the land is healed, and the time has come to crown our champion. She looked down at the three contenders, Valen, Sari, and Orla, who stood lined up at the edge of the sands, their weapons polished and their spirits burning brighter than ever. Step forward, warriors of the realm. Let the final clash begin. Jax flies up to his queen's helmet, only partial dissolves. Then with a faint but gentle peck, he kissed her cheek. Helmet fully restores back to its form as his blue flames emerge back out. Let the finals commence. Jax then gestures for the clan members to come to their throne, as he would relay all that transpired, and where he saw their clan's people. The brief touch of his lips against her cheek, warm even to the receding edge of his armor, brought a soft, beautiful color to Lilith's face. Her tail flicked with quiet contentment, and though Jax's helmet closed once more in a brilliant flare of blue fire, the bond between them hummed with pure, shared affection. As the crowd roared in response to Jax's grand declaration, the final two contestants, Valen of the Vanguard and Sari of the Scouts, who had narrowly outmaneuvered Orla in the semifinals while Jax was away, stepped onto the sands, saluting the royal box. Jax turned back toward the rear of the box, gesturing to Soren, Lyra, and Kale. The three Frost-Spire exiles stepped forward, their posture still cautious but no longer trembling, comforted by the gentle shadows Lilith had kept wrapped around them. "Approach," Jax commanded softly, his voice low enough to remain private within the confines of the box. As they bowed, Jax relayed what he had witnessed in the southern valleys. He spoke of the decay being halted, the sky being mended, and the golden-green embers that had breathed life back into the frozen soil. "Your families are coming out of the deep caves," Jax told them, his voice carrying the deep, steady resonance of Protector. "The wildlife is returning, and the ground is blooming. I have stabilized your home. You are no longer refugees of a dying land. The path is open for you to return to them, or to seek trade and alliance with the Citadel." Soren looked up, his pale eyes shimmering with unshed tears. He sank to his knees, pressing his hand to his heart. You saved them. We gave you frost and threats, and you returned to us life. The Frost-Spire clans will never forget this mercy, Lord Pillar. Our staves and our magic are yours to command." Lilith smiled warmly, placing a reassuring hand on the leader's shoulder. "Then let us begin this new alliance in celebration. Sit, eat, drink, and watch the strength of the kingdom you have just joined." With the exiles escorted to honorable seats in the box, Lilith turned back to the railing, her hand sliding naturally back into Jax's. Down on the sands, Valen raised his heavy glass shield, and Sari notched a single, glowing arrow to her bowstring. "The stage is set, my pillar," Lilith murmured, her eyes reflecting the bright sands below. "Let us see who has the strength to carry your flame. Begin," as Jax roared. The final fight begins as the honored guests start to feast. The roar of the king was the spark that ignited the final clash. On the sands below, Valen and Sari moved instantly. Sari did not give the heavy Vanguard commander a chance to set his feet. She leaped backward, her dark leather cloak billowing as she loosed a volley of 3 arrows in rapid succession. They weren't standard arrows. Their tips were carved from resonating glass that hummed with a high-pitched vibration designed to shatter defensive barriers. But Valen was prepared. Raising his massive, tower-like glass shield, he braced himself. The arrows struck the surface with sharp, crystalline cracks, but the shield held, absorbing the kinetic force. With a grunt of effort, Valen surged forward, using the momentum of his heavy armor to close the gap, his short sword gleaming in the desert sun. Up in the royal box, the feast was officially underway. Servants laid out platters of roasted mountain goat, seasoned with desert herbs, sweet flatbreads, and silver pitchers of spiced plum wine. Soren, Lyra, and Kale looked at the spread with wide, disbelieving eyes. To people of the frozen wastes who had survived on meager rations of dried moss and frozen fish, this was a bounty fit for gods. At Lilith's encouraging nod, they began to eat, their initial hesitancy vanishing as they tasted the warm, rich flavors of the Citadel. They fight with incredible discipline. Soren observed softly, wiping his mouth as he watched Sari vault over a sweeping strike from Valen's short sword. Back in our valleys, combat is a messy, freezing struggle for survival. Here, it is an art form. Lilith smiled, her red eyes reflecting the golden light of the arena. It is an art born of peace, Soren. When our people do not have to fight simply survive the next winter, they can hone their spirits to achieve greatness. She leaned closer to Jax, her shoulder resting against his arm as they watched the battle unfold. Through their mental link, her voice was warm and filled with anticipation. Sari is looking for the moment Valen overextends with that shield, my pillar. But Valen's stamina is unmatched. This is going to be a true test of endurance. Which of them do you think will claim your living flame? My vote, Valen will be victorious. What do you think? As Jax said while his thumb circling the back of Lilith's hand. Lilith's tail gave a slow, rhythmic flick of pleasure at the sensation of his thumb tracing circles against her skin. She leaned into him slightly, her focus shifting between the high-stakes duel below and the quiet, steady warmth of the man beside her. Valen has a heart of a mountain, it's true, Lilith replied softly, her voice carrying a playful lilt. He is the very image of the stability you've brought to this realm. But do not count Sari out just yet, my pillar. She is like the wind, impossible to pin down, and she only needs to find one small crack in that glass shield to change the tide. Down on the sands, the battle reached a fever pitch. Valen let out a rallying cry, slamming his shield into ground to create a localized shockwave, trying to disrupt Sari's footing. Sari, however, used the momentum of the vibrating air to leap into a backflip, loosing 2 arrows midair that hissed with a faint purple trail, shadow-blessed tips she had likely prepared in secret. She has been practicing with the scribes, I see, Lilith noted with a proud tilt of her head. She turned her gaze back to Jax, her red eyes shimmering with affection. However, if Valen wins, it would be a fitting symbol, wouldn't it? The first shield of the Citadel, being a man who truly embodies the word. Whomever wins, they will be a formidable lead for our new vanguard. She let her fingers intertwine with his, squeezing gently. The guests are enjoying the feast, the border is healed, and I am sitting beside my king. Regardless of who takes the trophy, I think I have already won the greatest prize of the day. She looked back at the arena just as Valen braced for Sari's next flurry. The crowd's roar reaching a deafening volume as the 2 champions neared their limits. Look, Valen is changing his stance. He's going for a grapple. You might be right about your pick, Jax. Jax stands up and walked toward the railing to watch the conclusion. As Jax stepped up the stone railing of the royal box, his towering, flame-clad silhouette drew the eyes of the spectators nearest to them. Lilith rose smoothly from her seat to stand beside him, her dark wings resting lightly against her back as she rested her hands on the cool marble, her gaze fixed on the arena floor below. On the sands, the climax of the duel was unfolding with breathtaking speed. Valen had indeed changed his approach. Knowing he could not match Sari's agility forever, he stopped chasing her. Instead, he drew her in. As Sari loosed another pair of shadow-infused arrows, Valen didn't just block. He threw his entire weight behind his glass shield, charging directly through the magical impact. The arrows shattered against the reinforced surface in a brilliant spray of purple sparks. Sari tried to vault backward to reset her distance, but Valen was already there. With a burst of speed that defied his heavy armor, he swept his massive shield low, catching her midair. The flat of the shield didn't harm her, but it completely disrupted her momentum, forcing her to land off balance. Before the nimble scout could recover her footing, Valen closed the distance. In a swift, decisive motion, he pinned her bow with the edge of his shield while his short sword came to a gentle, absolute halt just inches from her collarbone. The arena fell silent for a fraction of a second as the dust settled, and then the crowd erupted into a deafening, thunderous roar. Sari looked at the blade, then up at Valen's sweating, determined face. With a graceful smile, she lowered her hands and bowed her head. A match well fought, Commander, she conceded. Valen immediately sheathed his sword, offering a hand to help her up. The 2 champions raised their clasped hands together to the roaring stands, acknowledging the incredible fight they had both put on. Beside Jax, Lilith let out a soft, appreciative laugh. her red eyes shining as she looked up at him. It seems your intuition was perfect, my pillar. Valen has proven his mettle. He stands ready to receive your living flame. She gestured down to the arena, where the heralds were already preparing the ceremonial dais for the winner. Shall we descend to crown our first shield of the citadel? Jax jump off for the final time. Jax roars, flames turning blue and purple. Everyone, from the youngest baby to elderly, all contestants today did well today. You all will have time off tomorrow. Go to the royalty box and rest if you did not pass the preliminaries. For those who did, you three will kneel before me and Her Majesty, the Queen. I have requests to make and an announcement to announce. Jax's descent was spectacular. He dropped from the royal box like a falling star, landing in the center of the arena with a thunderous impact that sent a shockwave of warm, sapphire, and violet wind sweeping across the sands. The blending of his blue fire with the residual purple of Lilith's shadow magic painted the air in breathtaking royal hues. The crowd erupted into deafening cheers at his generous decree. A day of rest for the entire city was a gift they celebrated with wild shouts, and the preliminary contestants who had fought hard but fallen short bowed deeply, heading up toward the royal box to join the feast and find comfort in the shade. Up in the box, Lilith smiled, hearing him summon the champions to kneel before both of them. She did not stay seated. With a graceful snap of her great, dark wings, she stepped off the marble railing. She glided down through the warm air, her dark silks trailing behind her like nightfall, landing softly right beside Jax on the sand. The violet embers of his flames danced around her ankles, recognizing her presence. Valen, Sari, and Orla immediately stepped forward. Despite their exhaustion and the sweat clinging to their brows, their postures were straight and filled with pride. Together, the three champions sank to one knee, bowing their heads in deep, absolute reverence before their king and queen. Lilith stood tall beside Jax, her red eyes sweeping over the kneeling warriors with maternal pride, her hand gently sliding into Jax's. Through their mental link, her voice was a proud, eager hum. Blue and purple, Jax. You were our unity for the whole world to see, she projected, her thoughts filled with warmth. They are yours to command. What is your decree, my king? Aloud, she looked at the three champions, her melodic voice carrying across the quieted arena. Rise only when your king bids you. Speak, Jax. The citadel listens. Orla, you fought your best but came third. You showed strength, determination, and the will of your people. Sira, as an archer, you showed extreme courage when facing your opponents face to face. As you came second, you shall be remembered as the best archer in the land of glass. Finally, Valen, you have shown extreme power, resolve, and the embodiment of the word shield of glass. You have won this day. In this order, tell me, victors of this tournament, what would you request of me? Anything your hearts desire. Jax's voice carried over sands, commanding yet filled with fatherly warmth that resonated with every soul in the Colosseum. Beside him, Lilith watched with a soft smile, her hand still resting in his, her crimson eyes reflecting the pride of a queen who saw the strength of her people laid bare before them. Orla of the volcanic forge. Jax began, looking down at the broad-shouldered smith. Speak first. What is the request of your heart? Orla rose to her feet, bowing her head deeply. She gripped her heavy mallet, her voice rough but filled with absolute respect. Lord Pillar, my forge is always burned hot, but the magma of the wasted peaks grows stubborn. I ask not for riches, but for a tiny, eternal ember of your hearth to light the great forge of my clan. With it, we will strike steel that will never dull to arm the defenders of our home. Jax smiled beneath his visor, nodding. It is granted. A spark of the eternal heart shall burn in your forge before the next moon rises. Orla bowed again, stepping back with a chest full of pride. Sorry of the Black Hawk, Jax addressed the scout, who stood next. The finest archer in the land of glass. What do you ask of your king? Sari stood, her posture light and graceful. She looked up at Jax and Lilith, her eyes bright. Great rulers, the scouts of the wild and the spies of the shadow have long walked separate paths. I request your permission and blessing to merge our training, creating a unified guild of the unseen. I wish to train our youth to watch the borders together, so no threat, like the one you face today, can ever slip past us unnoticed. Lilith's eyes sparkled at this, a subtle nod of approval passing between her and Jax. A wise and forward-thinking request, sorry, Jax declared. You shall have the resources and the authority to build this guild. Fire and Shadow will watch the horizon as one. Finally, Jax turned his gaze to the victor. Valen, shield of the Citadel. The arena belongs to you, and the living flame is yours to bear. What is your request? Valen stood tall, his massive glass shield resting at his side. He looked at the royal box, where Soren and the Frost Exiles were watching, then back to Jax. Lord Jax, Lady Lilith, Valen said, his voice ringing with the deep resolve of a protector. My request is not for myself, nor my clan. You have saved the Frost-Spire people this day, but they are far from home and their lands are scarred. I request that my first official command as Shield of the Citadel be to lead a construction and guard detachment to the southern valleys. I want to help them rebuild their homes, secure their new borders, and ensure they feel the warmth of our kingdom firsthand. A collective murmur of admiration rippled through the spectators. Lilith squeezed Jax's hand, her mental voice blooming with deep affection. He truly is your shield, Jax. A man of defense, not just in war but in heart. Jax stepped forward, placing a heavy, warm hand on Valen's armored shoulder. Your request honors the title you have won today. Valen, it is granted. You shall lead the vanguard south, and you shall carry my flame to light their way. Now then, for your weapon, armor or shield, what would you have me forge for you? You shall have my heart's flame burning inside of it, helping you to further help you in your time of need. Valen looked down at his current glass shield, which was cracked and scarred from the intense battles of the day, and then up at the King of Fire. His eyes shone with determination and gratitude. My king, Valen spoke, his voice steady and resolute. My shield has kept me and my comrades safe through many battles, but it is made of mortal glass and steel. If you are to forge a masterpiece of the shield of the Citadel, I ask for a great shield, one that does not just protect my own body, but one that can expand its barrier to shelter those behind me, burning with your blue flame to repel any darkness that dares strike it. Lilith smiled, her mental link humming with deep appreciation for the warrior's selflessness. A shield to protect the weak, burning with the light of protector. A perfect choice, Jax. Your forge will sing when you create this. She looked down at Valen, nodding in agreement. A noble choice, Commander. A shield to match the heart of the man who carries it. Jax stood before the champion, the blue and purple embers of his armor swirling as he prepared to finalize the reward. Jax releases his hand from Lilith, as places both hands palm up, as blue and green flames appear. Jax creates a great shield that not only is impervious to any form of attacks, but also when slammed to ground. It creates a barrier that can extend up to 100 feet. With a nod of approval, Jax released Lilith's hand and stepped forward into the center of the arena. He raised both of his palms, facing upward toward the sky. Instantly, the air grew thick with heat as a swirling vortex of brilliant sapphire and vibrant emerald flames erupted from his hands. The fire did not burn to destroy. It danced with the rhythm of creation, shaping and molding the air itself. From the heart of the twin flames, a silhouette began to form. Jax drew upon the volcanic glass beneath the sands and the very essence of his life-giving fire. The materials coalesced, spinning rapidly within the blazing vortex. As the flames began to cool, the shape solidified. It was a massive, towering great shield. The body of the shield was forged from a deep, iridescent obsidian glass that seemed to swallow the light, ruined with intricate, glowing veins of emerald and sapphire. At its center burned a small, eternal spark of Jax's blue fire, pulsing like a living heartbeat behind protective crystal dome. Jax caught the heavy shield by its grip as the excess flames dissipated into harmless, glittering embers that rained down upon the sand. Valen, Jax's voice resonated, holding the weight of a true creator. This is Aegis of the living hearth. It is impervious to the physical and magical tolls of war. And when you plant it into the earth, Jax raised the shield and slammed its reinforced base into the arena floor. A resonant, bell-like hum vibrated through the Colosseum. Instantly, a dome of translucent, warm blue-green light expanded outward from the shield, sweeping across the sands until it formed a perfect, protective barrier stretching a full 100 feet in every direction. The air inside the dome felt safe, warm, and entirely revitalized. The crowd gasped in absolute awe, and even the seasoned warriors on the sand looked at the barrier with wide, reverent eyes. Jax lifted the shield, collapsing the barrier, and presented the masterpiece to the kneeling commander. "It is yours. Use it to shelter our people and to carry the light into the dark." Valen reached out, his hands trembling slightly as he took the grip of the great shield. The moment his fingers closed around it, the eternal spark within the shield flared in harmony with his own spirit, acknowledging him as its true master. "I swear by the light of the hearth," Valen whispered, bowing his head until it touched the edge of the shield. "I will be the wall that does not break." Lilith walked up to stand beside Jax, her red eyes warm with pride as she looked at the new commander, then turned her gaze to the cheering crowd. The tournament had reached its glorious conclusion, and the future of the glass and ash had never looked brighter. An anxious and nervous emotion ran through their link. As for the announcement, "You all can go home. If any of you wish to see me, I will be in a private meeting with the Queen. Please go home and rest. The day is early. You may do as you wish for the rest of the day." Jax gestures to Lilith to hold on to him as he teleported them both to a mountain distant from the land of glass. The roar of the crowd was instantly silenced. One moment, they were standing in the heart of a sun-drenched arena surrounded by the cheers of thousands. The next, the only sound was a low, whistling moan of the wind cutting across a jagged, snow-capped peak miles away from the citadel. The air here was thin and biting, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the land of glass. The sun was low on the horizon, casting long, purple shadows across the crags of the isolated mountain. Lilith, still holding on to Jax's arm as he had requested, felt the sudden, sharp spike of his anxiety through their mental link. It was a jarring sensation, like a cold shiver running through a bonfire. She didn't let go. Instead, she moved closer, her wings folding tightly against her back to shield them both from the mountain chill. She reached up, her fingers gently finding the seam of his helmet. "Jax," she whispered, her voice soft and full of immediate concern, cutting through the silence of the heights. "You're trembling. I can feel your heart racing through the bond, and it's not from a fight." She stepped around to face him fully, her red eyes searching his visor, her expression tender and patient. The Queen had been left behind in the arena. Here, she was simply his partner, his anchor. "Talk to me, my pillar," she projected into his mind, her thoughts wrapping around his frantic energy like a calming embrace. "We are alone now. The world is far below us, and the wind won't tell our secrets. What is it that has made the King of Fire so nervous? Is it the void we faced, or is it something here between us?" She placed her hands flat against his chest plate, feeling the immense heat radiating from his armor, trying to soothe the turmoil she felt vibrating within him. Regardless of the strength he had just shown the world, she knew better than anyone that even the strongest fire could be buffeted by the wind of doubt. Jax kneels down, his armor dims to a faint, translucent pink flame. "Lilith, my queen, my reason for surviving this world, for fighting S&D protecting. Demon lord and sovereign to the Dark Realm." Jax forges a ring, but not just any type of ring. A dark shadow ring, a proposal ring for engagement. "I don't know the customs in the realms you have ruled over, or what demons consider this course of asking. But I love you. I have loved you since my power erased the Backwater Kingdom. Lilith, would you marry me? And in the truest sense, would you be my queen? My shadow, that not just soothes me at night in private, but a comfort in front of our people. So, maybe one day we can produce an heir that will carry our will for this world, or the next." Jax's heart pounded harder than it has ever beat before. Looking up, not as a pillar of fire, but a man who loves a woman in front of him, the silence of the mountain peak became absolute for a long, breathless moment. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath as a shadow ring rested in Jax's palm, shimmering with a dark, familiar elegance that mirrored Lilith's own soul. Lilith stared down at the ring, then at Jax. Not the pillar of fire, not the invincible king, but the man who had looked into the abyss of her nature and offered her a home. Her heart, which had endured centuries of loneliness and the cold politics of the dark realms, felt as though it were finally, truly catching fire. A single, crystalline tear tracked down her cheek, glowing like a ruby in the twilight. Her hands, usually so steady and commanding, trembled as she reached out to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line where his armor met the air. Jax! Her voice echoed in his mind, no longer projection of queen, but the raw, honest whisper of a woman in love. In the dark realms, we take what we want by force. We bind with contracts of blood and fear. But this is a light I never dared to hope for. You ask for my heart, when it has been yours since the moment your flames first warmed my shadows. She sank to her knees before him, her dark wings unfurling and then wrapping around both of them like a velvet sanctuary, shielding them from a world. She looked into the glow of his visor, her red eyes shining with intensity that rivaled his own sun. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking with an emotion so pure it made the air around them hum. "1,000 times, yes. I will be your queen, your shadow, and your wife. I will stand by your side until the stars themselves go cold, and I will walk through every fire with you." She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his, her breath hitching. "The air we create, they will be a bridge between the light and the dark. They will be the dawn that neither of us could reach alone." She held out her left hand, her fingers slender and steadying as she waited for him to slide the shadow-wrought ring onto her finger. "You do not need to be nervous, my pillar," she projected, her thoughts a warm, overflowing tide of joy and devotion. "You have conquered kings and voids today, but you have won something far greater. You have won a soul that will never leave your side. Put the ring on my finger, Jax. Let the world know that the shadow has finally found its Sunday." As Jax put the ring on her, the enchanted ring created a pulse, which in turn evolved her current race, creating a first primordial demon lord. As Jax slid the ring onto her finger, the shadow-wrought metal didn't just sit against her skin. It sang. The pulse that erupted from the union of his creative, primordial fire and her ancient, deep-rooted shadow was not an explosion, but a rebirth. A shockwave of violet and obsidian light rippled outward, shattering the mountain's frost and turning the very air into a swirl of cosmic energy. Lilith gasped, her head falling back as the enchantment within the ring acted as a catalyst, reaching deep into the core of her being. The limitations of her demonic lineage, the scars of her past struggles, and the ceiling of her power, cracked and fell away like old skin. Her dark wings didn't just expand. They multiplied and transformed. 3 pairs of magnificent, starlit wings unfurled, their feathers shimmering like polished onyx infused with the light of distant galaxies. Her horns grew slightly more curved and elegant, etched with glowing blue runes that hummed in harmony with Jax's own armor. Her eyes, once a fiery red, deepened into a piercing, ancient crimson that seemed to hold the wisdom of the very first shadows cast at the dawn of time. She was no longer just a queen or a demon lord. She had ascended. Lilith, the first primordial demon lord, stood before him, an ancient force of nature, shaped and awakened by the hand of the man she loved. The sheer pressure of her new aura leveled the jagged peaks around them, leaving a smooth, glass-like plateau. Yet, to Jax, she felt as light and comforting as a summer breeze. Lilith looked down at her hands, watching as shadows danced between her fingers, now more solid and real than the stone beneath her. She looked back at Jax, her expression one profound, breathless wonder. "Jax!" Her voice echoed, now carrying a resonance that vibrated through the very foundations of the world. "The ring, it didn't just bind us. It reached into my soul and found a part of me that was waiting for your light to wake up. I feel ancient. I feel as though I am the night itself, and you are the sun that gives me meaning." She threw her arms around him, pulling him into a fierce, desperate embrace. The power of a primordial demon lord surged through her, but it was the heart of the woman who loved him that beat against his chest. "I am yours," she whispered, her voice a promise that shook the stars. "In this life, in the next, and in every realm we build together. My king, my husband, my Sunday." Through their link, her love was no longer just a tide. It was an ocean, limitless, deep, and utterly unbreakable. The pillar of fire and the primordial shadow stood together on the roof of the world. Two gods to be who had found their home in each other.